At 68 years old, I had finally done something I never thought I would live long enough to see. I sold the company I had built from nothing. The final number on the contract was $58 million. $58 million. But that night, sitting across from my only son, Ethan, I realized there was something far more valuable than money sitting at that table. My life. And my son had just tried to take it from me. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your entire heart, hit that like button. Subscribe to Ruthless Karma, and stay with me because what happened next wasn't just revenge. It was justice. The restaurant was the most expensive place in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung above us, casting warm light across white tablecloths. A pianist played softly somewhere behind the dining room. Everything looked perfect, but something about Ethan's smile felt wrong. $58 million, Dad, he said, lifting his glass. Can you actually believe it? I smiled. Not yet. His wife, Lauren, reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. We're so proud of you, Robert, she said. After everything you've done, you deserve to finally enjoy your life. Her words sounded loving, but her fingers were cold, and when she looked at Ethan, there was a silent exchange between them. A look that lasted barely a second. I'd spent 40 years negotiating contracts, reading competitors, and spotting lies before they became problems. I knew that look. Something was wrong. For 4 decades, I'd built Mercer Freight from one battered truck and a rented garage. There had been nights when I slept beside the loading dock because I couldn't afford another room. My hands had been permanently stained with grease. My back had ached. My first wife, Margaret, had stood beside me through all of it. She used to tell me, Robert, one day you'll have everything you worked for. I believed her. But Margaret had also warned me about Ethan. Be careful, she'd said years before she died. He doesn't always see you as his father. I had refused to believe her. Until tonight. After dinner, Ethan and Lauren stood and headed toward the dance floor. I watched them disappear into the crowd. Then I looked down at my drink. Cranberry juice. Nothing stronger. My doctor had warned me to take care of my heart. I reached for the glass, and that's when everything changed. A security guard appeared beside my table. His expression was calm, but his eyes were serious. Miss Mercer, he whispered, I don't mean to alarm you. I looked up. What is it? He leaned closer. I saw your son come back to the table earlier. My stomach tightened. He thought nobody was watching. The guard glanced around. Sir, I saw him put something into your drink. For a moment, the restaurant disappeared. The music, the conversations, the clinking glasses. Everything became silent. I stared at the drink in front of me, then at the dance floor. Ethan was laughing, smiling, celebrating his father's success. And suddenly I understood. He wasn't celebrating my life. He was waiting for it to end. I didn't react. That was the first thing the years had taught me. Never show your opponent what you know. I simply looked at the security guard and gave him a small nod. He understood. Then he walked away. I remained seated. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't change. But inside, my entire world was collapsing. Ethan, my son. The little boy who used to sit beside me in the cab of my first delivery truck. The boy who would fall asleep against the window while I drove home after midnight. The boy I had once carried upstairs after he scraped his knee. That boy was gone, and the man standing on the dance floor was apparently willing to murder his own father. Why? I already knew. Money over the past year, Ethan had started asking questions. Questions about my will. Questions about my investments. Questions about what would happen if something unexpected happened. Every time I laughed them off. I'm planning to live another 20 years, I'd told him once. His smile had disappeared for just a moment. I remembered that now. Every strange conversation. Every impatient phone call. Every time he asked about my health. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. Ethan and Lauren returned to the table. Dad, you okay? Ethan asked. I put a hand over my stomach. Little indigestion. His face changed. Only slightly. Are you sure? I'm fine. I smiled. Actually, I think I should head home. Ethan immediately offered to come with me. No, I stood slowly. I'll take a car. His shoulders relaxed. I noticed. That tiny movement told me everything. I accidentally knocked the glass from the table. It shattered. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth. Lauren gasped. Oh my God. I'm sorry, I said. A waiter rushed over. While everyone was distracted, I grabbed the soaked napkin that had been sitting beneath the glass and folded it into my pocket. Evidence. Then I walked outside. The cold night air hit my face. For the first time, fear entered my body. Not fear of dying. Fear of realizing that my own son had planned my death. I got into an Uber. But I didn't go home. I couldn't. Home was filled with photographs. Photographs of Margaret. Photographs of Ethan as a child. Photographs that suddenly felt like evidence from another man's life. Instead, I went to a diagnostic laboratory that had once handled testing for my company. I walked inside carrying the sealed napkin. "I need this analyzed," I said. The technician looked at me. "Tonight?" "Tonight." 3 hours later, I sat alone in a 24-hour diner. A cup of coffee cooled untouched in front of me. My phone finally buzzed. I opened the report. I read it once. Then again. The substance found in my drink could have caused a catastrophic cardiac event given my medical history. The amount wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Someone had researched my health. Someone had chosen something that could make my death look natural. And suddenly, the pieces connected. Ethan hadn't acted on impulse. He had planned. My son had studied my weaknesses. He had looked at my heart condition. He had waited until the perfect night. The night I had sold my company. The night everyone knew I had become worth $58 million. He had raised a glass with me, while secretly preparing my funeral. I stared through the diner window at the empty street. My first instinct was to call the police. Then I stopped. A public arrest. Headlines, courtrooms, my family's name dragged through every newspaper. Margaret's memory turned into a scandal. No, I wanted something different. I wanted Ethan to understand that the fortune he had been willing to kill for was never going to belong to him. I reached for my phone. There was one person I trusted. My attorney. Daniel Walsh. "Daniel," I said when he answered. "What happened?" I looked down at the report. "I need you to meet me before sunrise." "Why?" I took a breath. "My son just tried to kill me." There was silence. Then Daniel said quietly, "Tell me everything." Daniel arrived at his office before dawn. The city outside was still dark. I placed the laboratory report on his desk. He read it. His face hardened. Then he looked at me. "Robert, we need to go to the police." "I know." "Then why are you here?" I leaned back. "Because I don't want this to become a circus." Daniel stared at me. "He tried to murder you." "I know." "You could have died." "I know." My voice remained calm. "I don't want revenge that gives him the attention he wants." Daniel frowned. "Then what do you want?" I looked directly into his eyes. "I want to take away the thing he was willing to kill for." The room became silent. Daniel slowly smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the same expression I'd seen on his father's face years ago when we'd outmaneuvered a competitor. "You want demolition." "Exactly." Daniel immediately began working. Investigators were brought in. Financial specialists. Legal researchers. People who knew how to follow money without making noise. And while they investigated Ethan and Lauren, I played the role they expected. The old father. Confused. Grateful. Unaware. The next morning, Ethan called. "Dad, how are you?" I smiled even though he couldn't see me. "Just some indigestion." He exhaled. "Thank God." There it was. Relief, not concern. Relief. Then, I gave him the bait. "I'm thinking about establishing a family trust." Silence. 5 seconds. 5 very revealing seconds. "That's incredible, Dad." I could almost hear him calculating. "Maybe you and Lauren could help me organize everything." "Of course," he said. His voice was suddenly warm. Loving. I hung up. And for the next week I became the father Ethan had always wanted. I called him. I invited him over. I thanked him for checking on me. I even told him I was proud of him. Every word tasted bitter, but patience was part of the plan. Then Daniel's first report arrived. Ethan and Lauren were drowning. More than $2 million in debt. Credit cards pushed to their limits. Loans. A second mortgage. Luxury expenses they couldn't afford. Their home was close to foreclosure. I stared at the report. For years I had thought Ethan was simply entitled. Now I understood. He wasn't chasing a dream. He was trying to escape a financial disaster. But desperation didn't excuse murder. It explained it. The second report was worse. Lauren had been contacting art galleries. She was pretending to represent me, pretending that my health was failing, pretending she had permission to sell Margaret's artwork. Margaret's paintings. My wife's paintings. The collection we'd built when we were young. One landscape had taken us months to afford. Another painting had been bought after Margaret survived a serious illness. Those paintings weren't investments. They were memories. And Lauren had been photographing them while pretending to care about me. She wasn't visiting because she loved family. She was inventorying what she planned to steal. I closed the report. Something inside me went quiet. I had spent days hoping there was still some piece of my son worth saving. That hope disappeared. I called Daniel. I'm done watching. What do you want? Build the case. For the police? Not yet. I paused. I want consequences. Daniel nodded. Then let's give them consequences. But there was still one piece missing. We needed to know how long Ethan had been planning this. The answer arrived the next morning, and it was far worse than I expected. Daniel walked into my office without knocking. That alone told me the news was serious. He placed a folder on my desk. Robert, you need to see this. I opened it. The first page was a legal document, a medical authorization. My name was on it. My signature was underneath. I stared at the page. I never signed this. I know. Daniel continued. Someone forged your authorization and used it to access your medical information. My chest tightened. What information? Everything. My cardiac history. Medications, dosages, allergies, previous tests, weaknesses. Everything someone would need to know if they wanted to make my death look natural. I turned the page. Then another. And another. There were searches connected to burner phones. Questions about heart-related emergencies. Questions about disguising a fatal event as a natural death. The room suddenly felt cold. This wasn't an angry son making one terrible decision. This wasn't desperation exploding in a single moment. This was planning. Months of planning. Ethan had studied me like an enemy. He had researched my body, my health, my money, my estate, my habits, my weaknesses, and he had waited. I thought about the boy in my first truck, his little hand gripping the dashboard. Dad, are we rich yet? I'd laughed. Not today. Tomorrow? Maybe. Now I realized something painful. I had spent years building a fortune for a child who had spent months preparing to inherit it without me. I closed the folder. Whatever love remained inside me didn't disappear in an instant. It died slowly, quietly, like a light being switched off in an empty room. I looked at Daniel, set the meeting. With Ethan? With both of them. What will you tell them? I smiled. That the family trust is ready. The meeting was scheduled for the 40th floor of my old corporate headquarters, a room designed for billion-dollar decisions. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, gray clouds hanging over the city. Ethan and Lauren arrived dressed like they were attending a celebration. Ethan hugged me, for the first time in 20 years. It felt strange, not comforting, not familiar, like being hugged by a stranger who happened to have my son's face. Lauren kept looking at the folders on the table. Her eyes moved from one to another. Greed flickered across her face, then disappeared. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The assistant left. The door closed. Daniel sat across from them. I remained at the head of the table. Ethan smiled. So, Dad. Daniel opened the first folder. Item 1. He pushed a document across the table. The laboratory report. Ethan's smile vanished. His face went completely still. Lauren looked at him. Then at me. What's this? I didn't answer. Daniel opened the second folder. Item 2. The financial investigation. $2 million in debt. Foreclosure, loans, maxed accounts. Lauren's face drained. Then came the third folder. The gallery communications. Her own recorded words. Her plans to sell Margaret's paintings. Her claims that I was dying. Lauren's lips parted. No. Ethan looked at her. For the first time, he seemed genuinely afraid of his wife. Then Daniel placed the fourth folder on the table. The forged medical authorization. The stolen medical records. The investigation. The search history. The evidence. The room went silent. Ethan stared at the pages. I watched him finally understand. The old man he had underestimated had been watching too. Lauren was the first to speak. This is a mistake. Her voice trembled. We didn't do anything. I looked at her. Didn't you? She couldn't meet my eyes. Ethan finally whispered, Dad. I raised my hand. No, one word. And he stopped. For months he had controlled the conversations, asked questions, pushed boundaries. Calculated tonight he had nothing left to calculate. Daniel opened another folder. Every document here has been independently verified. Ethan's hands began to shake. You don't understand. I almost laughed. Don't I? You don't know what was happening. I know you were drowning in debt. His eyes dropped. I know you were desperate. He said nothing. And I know you decided my death was cheaper than fixing your life. Lauren began crying. But I felt nothing. Not hatred. Not rage. Just exhaustion. Then I said the sentence I had been waiting all week to deliver. There will be no family trust. Ethan looked up. What? No trust. His face collapsed. But you promised. I promised nothing. You said I said what I needed to say to see what you would do. He stared at me. Then I slid one final document across the table. The entire $58 million has already been transferred. Ethan's breathing changed. Transferred where? I looked at him. Into the Margaret Mercer Foundation. His eyes widened. What? I continued. A charitable foundation in your mother's name. The foundation would support young artists and conservation projects. The two things Margaret had loved most. The money is no longer mine, I said, and it certainly isn't yours. Ethan's face turned pale. You can't do that. I already did. Lauren's tears stopped. You would give all of it away? Yes, after everything? I looked at her. After everything you did. Ethan stood abruptly. You can't just take my inheritance. That sentence told me everything. Not my life. Not his father. His inheritance. I slowly stood. Ethan, you never had an inheritance. He froze. You had a father. My voice cracked slightly. And you traded him for money. Silence. Then I gave them their choices. Option 1. I pointed toward Daniel. He contacts the district attorney. The evidence would be handed over. The attempted murder, the fraud, the forged authorization. Everything, you both face prosecution. Ethan swallowed. Or, option 2. I pushed another document forward. You sign away every future claim against my estate. His eyes moved across the page. You sign over your house. Lauren gasped. You leave the city, and you never contact me again. Ethan stared at me. Why would you let us walk? I leaned closer. Because I don't want you in prison. He looked confused. I want you alive. I paused. And I want you to wake up every morning knowing you lost everything you were willing to kill for. Daniel added one final condition. The evidence remains secured. If either of you violates the agreement, it goes directly to prosecutors. Nobody spoke. Ethan's hand slowly reached for the pen. He signed. His signature looked nothing like the confident signature I'd seen on business documents. It looked small. Broken. Lauren signed next. Her tears fell onto the paper. They stood. Neither said goodbye. They simply walked toward the door. Before Ethan left, he stopped. He looked back at me. For 1 second, I saw the little boy from my old truck. Then he disappeared. The door closed, and I was alone. For the first time in 40 years, I had no idea what came next, but I knew what would not come next. My son would never get the fortune he had tried to kill me for. 3 months passed. People expected me to feel victorious. I didn't. At first I thought revenge would feel different. I imagined satisfaction. Maybe anger. Maybe some great moment where I would finally feel whole again. But there was no celebration. There was only silence. One morning, I walked through the house and stopped in front of Margaret's photographs. She was smiling in one. Young. Beautiful. Holding a paintbrush. I remembered the first painting we'd ever bought. It wasn't expensive. We could barely afford it. But Margaret loved it. She said the colors made her feel hopeful. I had almost lost that painting to Lauren's greed. That thought hurt more than the money ever could. So I made a decision. The foundation wouldn't simply hold Margaret's money. It would carry her spirit forward. I began funding young artists, people who had talent but no money, painters who worked from tiny apartments, sculptors who couldn't afford studios, students who had been told their dreams were impractical. I watched them create. I watched them struggle. I watched them succeed. And slowly, something inside me changed. I had spent 40 years believing a legacy meant leaving everything to my child. A company, a house, investments, money, security. But Ethan had taught me something I never expected to learn. Money doesn't create character. It reveals it. I had given my son opportunities. He had chosen entitlement. I had given him trust. He had chosen betrayal. I had offered him a future. He had tried to take mine. So I stopped asking myself what Ethan deserved. I started asking what Margaret deserved. She deserved to be remembered for the things she loved, not for the betrayal of our son, not for the scandal that almost happened, not for the paintings that someone nearly sold. Her name deserved to mean something good. And that was exactly what I would make it mean. One afternoon, Daniel called. "Robert, the Foundation's first exhibition is ready." I smiled. "Then let's open the doors." That evening, I walked into a small downtown gallery. The walls were covered with bold, imperfect paintings. Nothing looked polished. Nothing looked manufactured. Every piece felt alive. A young woman stood beside one canvas. Her hands were stained with paint. She was nervous. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes?" "I don't know what to say." "Say what?" "Thank you." I looked at her painting. It was chaotic. Blue, orange, black, gold. For some reason it reminded me of Margaret. "What does it mean?" I asked. The young artist smiled. "It means I survived something." I looked at her, then back at the painting. And suddenly, I understood. That was what Margaret had always done. Survived, loved, built, created. She never measured her life by what she owned. She measured it by what she gave. I felt something warm behind my eyes. For months I had believed my son had stolen something from me. Maybe he had. Maybe he had stolen the illusion that blood automatically creates loyalty. But he had also forced me to see something I'd ignored for decades. My legacy wasn't Ethan. My legacy wasn't $58 million. My legacy was what happened to that money after I was gone. And that evening, for the first time since the restaurant, I smiled. A real smile. One that reached my eyes. I didn't feel like a man who had defeated his enemy. I felt like a man who had finally found his purpose. The first exhibition opened on a rainy Saturday evening. People filled the gallery. Young artists stood beside their work. Families walked from painting to painting. Strangers talked, laughed, dreamed, and everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of Margaret. Not literally. Emotionally. The courage. The color. The hope. The refusal to give up. A reporter eventually approached me. "Mr. Mercer, people keep asking why you gave away your fortune." I smiled. "Because I finally understood what it was for." She looked confused. "Wasn't it originally meant for your family?" I thought about Ethan. The restaurant. The drink. The security guard. The folders. The trembling signature. Then I looked around the gallery. "No," I said. "It was meant to create something that outlived me." I never told the reporter everything. Some stories don't belong in newspapers. Some wounds don't need an audience. Ethan was gone from my life. Lauren was gone too. I never contacted them. I never searched for them. And strangely, I didn't hate them anymore. That was the final part of my revenge. I stopped allowing them to occupy space in my mind. They had wanted my money. I took that away. They had wanted my death. I refused to give them that too. They had wanted to inherit the life I built. Instead, they were forced to build their own. Maybe they would succeed. Maybe they wouldn't. That was no longer my responsibility. For the first time, Ethan's future belonged entirely to Ethan. No inheritance. No safety net. No father to rescue him from consequences. Just choices. And consequences. I looked at the foundation's name hanging above the gallery entrance. The Margaret Mercer Foundation. My wife was gone. But her kindness wasn't. Her dreams weren't. Her love wasn't. They were alive in every young artist who walked through those doors. And suddenly, I realized something. My son had tried to turn my death into his inheritance. Instead, his betrayal had transformed my fortune into a legacy. He wanted $58 million. I gave $58 million a purpose. He wanted my wife's paintings sold for profit. I used her memory to help strangers create their first masterpieces. He wanted my story to end. Instead, it became the beginning of hundreds of other stories. That's the irony he will never escape. He thought he was killing a man. He was actually forcing that man to finally understand why he had survived so long. I survived to build. I survived to give. I survived to remember. And I survived to prove that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's becoming completely free of them. So if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, remember this. Don't let their cruelty decide who you become. Don't let their greed make you bitter. And don't confuse revenge with destruction. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply taking back your power and using it to build something they can never touch. I thought I was going to lose my life that night. Instead, I gained a second one. And the fortune my son nearly killed me for? It became something far more valuable than money. It became hope. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you for money? And if you enjoy powerful stories about betrayal, justice, and ruthless karma, subscribe to Dad's Cold Revenge. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's walking away while they finally realize what they lost.